Hey guys, tonight, imagine the sound of bells carried across misty fields, their iron voices breaking the dark grip of night. A damp chill clings to the thatch, seeping into wool cloaks, and the smoke of last night's fire lingers in the rafters. Somewhere a rooster is working on his self-appointed role as village alarm clock, though half the cottages wish he'd oversleep. The straw bed beneath you still smells faintly of last summer's fields, but it scratches like it's trying to argue with your skin. You roll over, staring at the low ceiling that bulges like it's been in a wrestling match with rainstorms. Tonight, I'm inviting you into that small cottage, into that morning where the medieval world wakes not with luxury, but with the smell of damp wool, the cry of livestock, and the scrape of wooden shutters thrown open. You'd probably never make it through a single medieval night. But don't worry, I'll guide you safely through. So before we go any further, if this quiet company helps, you can gently tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Maybe lying awake in New York or drifting in a quiet room in London. Drop your time and place below, so none of us feel alone tonight. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey. Together, here on Timeless Sleep. The first light of dawn spills through cracks in the shutter, thin and grey. It isn't sunlight so much as an official notice that sleep is no longer an option. The church bell tolls, deep and hollow, shaking sparrows from the rafters of the nave, and in your cottage, it feels like a summons you didn't sign up for. In a village, dawn isn't optional. It's mandatory. Beds aren't beds, really. Just sacks of straw with personalities. Some are friendly. Others contain small armies of fleas with questionable attitudes. If you're lucky, you might get a layer of linen between your skin and the straw. If you're unlucky, you'll learn more than you ever wanted to about medieval wildlife. The family rises together, the cottage crowded with yawns and smoke. Father fumbles for boots stiff with yesterday's mud. Mother stirs the ashes to coax a reluctant flame. Children shiver in oversized tunics passed down through more siblings than anyone dares count. The air smells of ash, damp wool, and occasionally regret. Privacy is not a thing. Curtains are a rumour. Everyone sees everything, which means everyone knows who snores, who kicks, and who mutters the names of saints in their dreams. Outside, the lane is already stirring. Neighbours stumble out like actors in a play that begins every morning without rehearsal. Smoke curls from chimney holes, each puff a small declaration that another household has survived the night. The cottages huddle close together, built of wattle and daub, their walls more mud than architecture, their thatch alive with sparrows and the occasional mouse plotting real estate expansion. You pass the doorway and duck under the low lintel, because if you forget, the lintel will remind you personally. It has a sense of humour, mostly at your expense. The bell rings again, more insistent, reminding you that God waits for no one, except perhaps the baker, who always claims his loaves are the Lord's work in progress. The village priest, half awake and smelling faintly of candle wax and last night's ale, is already bustling about, looking as if holiness can be achieved by sheer speed. He rings the bell like he's trying to argue with the sun. You wonder if even saints sometimes cover their ears. The fields beyond the cottages shimmer with dew. The grass is wet enough to soak your boots within a few careless steps, and the air tastes of iron and mist. Somewhere, a cow complains loudly, reminding everyone that livestock run the show here. Animals don't check the calendar. They demand feeding, milking, mucking, and negotiating. Medieval villagers may think they own cows, pigs, and chickens, but really it's a hostile takeover in reverse. The animals own the villagers, leasing them out as live-in staff. You join the line of figures trudging toward the church, shoulders hunched, breaths clouding the air. The bell calls them not just to prayer, but to order. In a world without clocks, bells are the schedule, and they argue with no one. Work begins when they ring. Meals pause when they ring. Souls are judged on Sundays when they ring extra long. Medieval bells are like the original version of your smartphone notifications, except you can't mute them, and they weigh several £100. The church itself looms at the village centre, half stone, half stubbornness, built by ancestors who clearly believed in doing penance through architecture. Its walls sweat damp, its windows are tiny slits that let in less light than a keyhole. Inside, the smell of beeswax mingles with the breath of a dozen villagers trying not to sneeze. Candles flicker, shadows lurch along the walls, and the priest drones Latin that most don't understand but all pretend to follow. Religion in this world isn't optional background music. It's the entire stage, the script, and the director. Even if you don't grasp the words, you feel their weight. And yet half the congregation is secretly making grocery lists in their heads. Bread, salt, maybe an extra egg if the hens cooperate. Faith may occupy the lips, but hunger keeps tugging at the stomach. Children fidget, mothers hiss at them to hush. Fathers pray with eyes half closed, as if hoping God will mistake drowsiness for devotion. Somewhere, a baby wails. The priest sighs. The candle gutters. Life and worship blur, indistinguishable. When the service ends, the day begins properly. The villagers spill into the lane, voices rising with the smoke. Men mutter about weather and soil, women compare notes about who's ill, whose cow is limping, whose husband is limping, and which of those limps are worth worrying about. Children dart between legs like over-caffeinated pigeons until someone shoos them toward the well with instructions to fetch water and ideally not fall in this time. The sun crawls higher, though higher in medieval terms means it climbs reluctantly through haze, casting more shadow than brilliance. Still, it's enough to stir the cottages into action. Fires are coaxed, pots filled, bread sliced, and the first real meal of the day emerges. Coarse bread, a ladle of pottage left from last night, and perhaps a sip of ale so weak it's practically flavoured water. Breakfast isn't a feast. It's a negotiation with hunger. If you want variety, you can either dream about it or wait until a feast day when someone roasts something larger than a chicken. As you chew the tough crust, you realise that teeth are more like endangered species here. By middle age, most villagers have a dental landscape best described as historical ruins. Bread grinds against them like sandpaper, and every bite is a prayer that nothing cracks. If it does, there's no dentist, only the village blacksmith, and trust me, you don't want him near your mouth with pliers. By now, the village hums. Chickens strut in lanes like they own stock in the place. Pigs squeal as they're prodded towards scraps, and geese chase children with vendettas stretching back generations. The cottages look as though they've been kneaded out of bread dough, leaning against each other for moral support. Each one shelters a family with the same rhythm. Rise with the bell, pray, feed, trudge, survive. Dawn is less a beginning than a continuation. The night has ended, yes, but life, in all its stubborn repetition, has simply resumed its endless loop. And yet, despite the smoke, fleas, and teeth-grinding bread, there's beauty here. The air carries the sweet bite of wood smoke, the fields glimmer with dew, and the sound of bells fading into distance gives the morning a strange dignity. Survival may be mandatory, but within it are quiet moments of peace, the warmth of a clay mug in your hand, the softness of a child's laugh in the lane, the smell of damp earth promising crops yet to come. You stretch your shoulders, watching the sun edge over the thatch and prepare to join the day's labours. Dawn has done its part. It has dragged the village from darkness into weary light, set the rhythm, fed the hearths, and reminded everyone that life, even when hard, is insistently alive. The bell may fade, but its echo lingers, shaping everything that follows. The first meal of the day isn't something you leap into with joy. It's something you negotiate with. Bread, pottage, and ale. 3 old companions who never bother to dress up. Imagine bread so coarse it's more weapon than food. You could throw a loaf at neighbour and settle a land. Dispute. It's made from rye, barley, or whatever grain happened to survive the last storm, and it comes with the occasional bonus guest, a pebble that somehow snuck into the flour mill. If you were hoping for breakfast muffins, wrong century. This bread doesn't fluff. It broods. The pottage is yesterday's stew in disguise, thickened overnight into a bubbling, suspiciously self-aware sludge. It's a medieval smoothie of beans, peas, onions, and cabbages, with the faint rumour of pork if someone in the village got lucky. Sometimes it's green, sometimes brown, occasionally grey, a colour chart best described as abandoned garden shed. Still, it's warm, it's filling, and it doesn't argue much with your stomach. Pottage is like that friend who never surprises you, but also never lets you down. And then there's ale. Not the fancy craft ale with names like Dragon's Breath or Ye Olde IPA. No, this ale is small beer, brewed weak so even toddlers can drink it without needing an exorcism. Water is often unsafe, full of things best left unnamed. So ale is the hydration of choice. It's cloudy, sour, and tastes like someone whispered grain over slightly fermented rainwater. But it keeps you alive, and in the medieval world that's practically a Michelin star. Around the table the family slurps and chews in the smoky half-light. No one talks much. Conversation before sunrise is for the wealthy. The children dunk bread into pottage, softening it enough to save their teeth from early retirement. The father gnaws with the grim determination of a man who knows he has to face a plough soon. The mother eats quickly between stirring the fire, wiping a child's nose, and checking if the hens have laid. Meals aren't leisurely pauses here, they're fuel stops. Outside, the lane smells of wet earth, manure and bread crusts toasted by the communal oven. The oven is a clay bulge built like a beehive, shared by several households, because building one per cottage would require more wood than a medieval forest can politely spare. Villagers bring their dough, marked with unique patterns so no one goes home with the wrong loaf. If you think burnt cookies cause neighbourly tension today, imagine explaining to old widow Agnes why you accidentally took her bread. The baker's cottage is a noisy hotspot at this hour. He sweats over fire, shoves loaves into the glowing mouth of the oven, and pretends not to notice gossip flowing faster than smoke. Villagers gather, waiting for bread, trading news about weather, livestock, and who sneezed during Mass, scandalous. A rumour about a wolf seen near the woods is passed around like an unwanted cup. Someone adds details that sound suspiciously invented. Glowing eyes, enormous size. And soon the wolf has grown larger than a cottage. Medieval gossip has no fact-checkers. Breakfast doesn't mean sitting still either. As soon as bread is chewed and ale swallowed, the day demands movement. Men head toward fields, tools slung over shoulders. Women clean, spin, or march toward the well-balancing buckets like unwilling acrobats. Children scatter, some to chores, some to mischief, often the same thing. The rhythm of survival doesn't allow for lounging. You either move or the day tramples you like a runaway pig. Still, there are moments of comedy hidden inside this seriousness. A goose waddles proudly into the lane, pursued by a red-faced boy who promised he'd keep it penned. The goose honks like a furious trumpet, biting at skirts and trousers with the ferocity of a guard dog. Villagers laugh, then sigh, because they know it will be their turn next week. Geese are equal opportunity terrorists. The breakfast table is also the medieval newsroom. Information spreads while spoons clink against wooden bowls. Someone mutters about a neighbouring village struck by fire. Another worries about rumours of higher tithes. Taxes never wait politely. They arrive like uninvited relatives. But there are lighter notes too. Someone's daughter is betrothed. Someone's piglet survived the night. Someone saw the priest tripping on his cassock again. Every bite comes with a side of chatter. By mid-morning, hunger is postponed, not defeated. Bread and pottage don't exactly leave you feeling athletic. They're more like ballast than energy. Your belly is heavy, your limbs sluggish, and you carry the faint aftertaste of onions as if medieval cuisine wanted to leave a permanent reminder. Ale sloshes gently in your stomach, keeping thirst at bay, but also reminding you that medieval hydration tastes faintly of barn floor. You walk past cottages with smoke still curling upward, past the clang of the blacksmith testing his bellows, past women beating laundry at the stream until the sound resembles war drums. A pig squeals, a dog barks, someone swears creatively about mud. The entire village moves in sync like a badly rehearsed orchestra. Everyone knows their part, even if they play it with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Food preparation continues even after the morning meal. Pottage is topped up, stirred, and thickened with whatever scraps can be spared. Bread dough is kneaded again. calloused hands working the grain with the rhythm of generations. Herbs hang drying from rafters, promising both flavour and dubious medical miracles. Salt, precious as gold, is measured carefully, because wasting it feels like a crime against the entire household. Children hover nearby, begging for scraps, licking wooden spoons when no one's looking. Cats patrol underfoot, eyes gleaming with the suspicion that every pot should be theirs. Dogs sit outside, noses twitching, pretending loyalty while plotting theft. Even meals too humble for feasts still attract an audience of hungry creatures. And here's the strange truth. Despite the monotony, breakfast holds a kind of comfort. It's not about taste or variety. It's about the ritual. You eat the same bread, the same pottage, the same ale, day after day, and in that sameness lies a rhythm that steadies life. In a world full of uncertainties, weather, disease, raids, lords with expensive hobbies, the predictability of breakfast is almost soothing. You know what's coming. You know it will fill you just enough to push the plough, mend the roof, survive the day. Imagine trying to explain brunch to these villagers. A leisurely meal of pancakes, coffee and orange juice. They'd look at you as if you'd claimed dragons cook your eggs. For them, food is survival, not spectacle. Bread, pottage, ale, the holy trinity of not collapsing in a field before noon. Of course, there are exceptions. A wealthier household might add butter or honey, though these luxuries shine briefly before vanishing. If someone's fortunate enough to keep a cow, a splash of milk sweetens the bowl. On feast days, breakfast might actually taste cheerful. Fresh cheese, meat scraps, perhaps even a sweetened cake. But those days are rare, like bright coins hidden in mud. And sometimes, the meal becomes a test of patience. A loaf underbaked, still doughy at the core, pottage with too much cabbage, turning the cottage into a symphony of indigestion, ale gone sour, puckering lips into expressions of betrayal. Food is survival, but it's also gamble. By the time the bowls are scraped clean, smoke lingers in the rafters, and the day calls louder than hunger. You push back from the table, belly neither full nor empty, and step out into lanes that smell of earth and labour. The memory of bread crust sticks between your teeth, the taste of ale clings to your tongue, and your stomach gurgles a quiet reminder that it will soon want more. Breakfast has done its duty. It has armed you against the hours ahead. And so the village moves forward, fueled by bread heavy as stone, pottage stubborn as mud, and ale weak as gossip. Dawn has slipped into day, and hunger has been silenced if not satisfied. The sun finally begins to climb higher, shrugging off the grey mist that clings to the village lanes. Its light glances across damp rooftops and spills into the furrows of the fields waiting beyond the hedges. After the morning's bread and pottage, there is no lingering. The fields are calling, and in a medieval village the fields do not like to be kept waiting. You tug on rough boots hardened with yesterday's mud, grip a wooden tool polished by countless hands before yours, and step into the world where most of your hours will vanish. The soil greets you with a damp kiss. Not romantic, more like an overeager neighbour leaning too close. It clings to your boots, clods heavy enough to remind you that the earth will always have the upper hand. Oxen shift impatiently at the edge of the furrows, great lumbering beasts with eyes that look both saintly and slightly bored. They've seen centuries of humans pretending to be, in charge, and they remain unimpressed. Their yokes creak, leather straps groaning as if protesting yet another day of dragging wooden ploughs through stubborn ground. Ploughing isn't graceful. It's not a scene painted in golden hues with smiling farmers whistling merrily. No, it's mud splattering in your face, your shoulders straining until you wonder if you'll hear them crack, and oxen deciding halfway through a row that actually they'd prefer to wander toward the hedge. Steering them is an art form somewhere between ballet and wrestling, except in ballet the dancers don't weigh half a ton and occasionally relieve themselves mid-performance. The wooden plough itself is hardly cutting-edge technology. It's a heavy frame tipped with iron, dragged by brute strength more than clever design. It slices into the soil like a dull spoon through cold butter, and you constantly lean your weight into it, urging it forward, muttering curses you hope the priest can't hear from the churchyard. Every furrow you make is a small victory, and every crooked line is a reminder that you're human, not divine surveyor. As you trudge, the smell of freshly turned earth rises, damp, rich, and faintly sour. Worms writhe in the furrows, annoyed at their unexpected eviction. Birds circle overhead, quick opportunists ready to snatch exposed insects. The entire ecosystem seems to wake up alongside you, feeding off your labour as though the fields are hosting a feast in your honour, and everyone but you gets to enjoy it. Beside you, other villagers work their strips of land. The medieval open field system means no one gets a neat square plot. Instead, everyone's holdings are scattered in thin strips across the great communal field, parcelled out like awkwardly torn bread. It's as if a drunk man with a pair of shears designed the village map. You greet your neighbours in tired nods, occasionally sharing complaints about oxen or weather. Sometimes you swap jokes, the kind so old they creak, but laughter in a field can feel like warmth in your chest. The work rhythm is steady. Press, drag, steer, stumble, curse, repeat. Sweat drips into your eyes, mud coats your hands, and every breath feels like it carries a bit of the earth into your lungs. Yet there's also a strange music to it. The creak of wood, the grunt of oxen, the squelch of mud underfoot. It's not beautiful music, but it's familiar, the kind that reminds you you're part of a chain stretching back generations. Of course, accidents happen. The plough snags a buried stone and jolts like a wild beast. You stumble forward, knees bending in ways they were never designed for, while the oxen look back at you with expressions that clearly say, "That was on you." Sometimes the blade strikes a root, sending vibrations through the handle that rattle your bones like a bad lute performance. Occasionally you simply trip over your own feet, collapsing into a heap that makes your neighbours chuckle behind their hands. Farming may be sacred labour, but it's also slapstick comedy. The soil itself changes its mood row by row. Some patches are soft, pliable, and welcoming, like dough ready for kneading. Others are stubborn, filled with rocks, clods, or the malicious intent of clay. Farmers develop a sixth sense for soil, its smell, its texture, its grudges. You learn to read the ground like a story. This patch drowned in last year's floods. That one yielded barley like a miracle. Another hides weeds plotting mutiny. Children hover at the edges of the fields, tasked with scaring away crows. They wave rags tied to sticks, shout half-heartedly, and occasionally get distracted enough to let a crow strut proudly through the furrows. The birds are clever, watching for the moment attention wavers, swooping down to steal seeds. You watch a boy yell at them with all the fury of a miniature knight, only to slip in the mud and end up scaring no one but himself. The crows laugh, or at least they sound like they do. Mid-morning brings the first pause. You lean on the plough handle, breathing heavily, while the oxen chew cud as if mocking your exhaustion. A flask of weak ale is passed around, a swallow of sour liquid that tastes like relief disguised as disappointment. You wipe your brow with a sleeve already damp and grimy, glance at the horizon, and realise the sun has barely moved. Time in the fields is elastic. Hours stretch, bend, and twist, but they never hurry. Work resumes. Seeds are scattered into furrows, cast from calloused hands with practised arcs. Wheat, barley, oats. Each grain is a gamble placed on the table of the earth. Will rain come kindly, or will storms drown the crop? Will locusts arrive, or mice chew through the stores? Every handful of seed is both hope and worry, an investment in a future you may or may not live to see. You toss it anyway, because not tossing it guarantees hunger. Farming is just rolling dice with God, watching closely. Occasionally the Lord's Reeve rides by, checking that the villagers are doing their part. He sits tall on his horse, cloak flapping, face smug with the assurance of someone who doesn't spend his mornings wrestling with oxen. He reminds you that part of your labour belongs to the manor, not just your family. You nod, bite back the urge to comment and dig the plough deeper into the earth. Sarcasm may be satisfying, but sarcasm doesn't plough fields, and the stocks in the village green are very good at discouraging wit. The sun climbs higher, beating down on your neck. Sweat trickles through the grime on your skin. You catch yourself humming tunelessly, anything to distract from the ache in your arms. Someone nearby starts singing a ballad about Robin Hood, though his version involves more pigs than arrows. Another worker shouts at oxen in phrases so creative they deserve their own poetry manuscript. The fields echo with human voices, tired, but stubborn, weaving sound into the morning air. By noon, your stomach begins to mutter again, demanding more than the bread and pottage it received at dawn. But food is hours away. Until then, you tighten your belt, push the plough another row, and remind yourself that every furrow means grain, and grain means survival. The fields don't just feed you, they define you. Your back may bend, your hands may blister, but the soil doesn't negotiate. It only answers sweat with harvest, if it feels generous. Still, there's a strange beauty when you pause and lift your gaze. The furrows stretch in long lines, the horizon shimmers with heat, the sky arcs vast and pale above. Birds swoop, oxen sigh, villagers move steadily, and the world feels both ancient and alive. You're one figure in a vast tapestry, woven into the rhythm of soil and sun. The day is only beginning, but already you've carved lines into the earth that will outlast the footprints of your boots. You lean again into the plough, breath steadying, eyes narrowing on the next row. The sun climbs higher, the soil waits, and your labour becomes the language of the day. From sunrise until exhaustion, the fields are your cathedral, your battlefield, your home. Children are the first to scatter once the furrows are set and the oxen plod into their afternoon sulk. Their jobs aren't glamorous, but they are essential, because the village survives not only on the sweat of ploughmen and the weaving of women, but also on the endless, half-bumbling efforts of its youngest. You follow them now, from the edge of the fields back into the winding dirt lanes of the village, where their voices carry high above the clatter of buckets and the squawks of geese. Childhood here is less about innocence and more about usefulness, and whatever scraps of mischief can be squeezed between chores. A group of boys is already heading toward the well, balancing yokes across their shoulders with wooden buckets swinging precariously. The well is the village's lifeline, a dark throat of stone lined with moss, cool and slightly sinister. Every trip is an exercise in prayer. May the rope not snap, may the bucket not fall in, may no one topple head first. A slip could mean disaster, and more than one ballad whispers about a child lost to the depths, transformed by rumour into a water spirit who pinches ankles when people draw too quickly. Still, water must be fetched several times a day, so the boys march on, laughing louder than their nerves. The girls, meanwhile, are gathered near the cottages with bundles of kindling and armfuls of herbs to sort. They carry themselves with a seriousness that belies their age, imitating their mothers' postures even as they sneak glances at the boys, daring each other to lean dangerously over the well. A girl drops a bundle of sticks. Another immediately scolds her in the tone of a grandmother. Even at 8 years old, practice for future authority is well underway. Not all chores are solemn. One child has been sent to chase birds from the sprouting crops. His strategy is to wave his arms and shriek like a banshee, occasionally throwing clumps of dirt. The crows, unimpressed, hop a few feet away and resume their feast. It becomes a dance. Child lunges, crows scatter. Child collapses in the mud, crows circle back. Eventually the boy sits down and declares a truce, talking to the birds as if they might negotiate terms. If nothing else, he's inventing diplomacy centuries ahead of its time. Around the lanes, the sounds of play slip between tasks. 2 children crouch in the dust, scratching crude shapes into the ground with sticks. Their game has no rules except the ones they invent on the spot. Another pair tosses a leather ball back and forth until it inevitably lands in the midden heap, and suddenly no one wants to touch it. Still, laughter rises, a reminder that even in a world of toil, children will seize joy wherever it hides. One boy drags a wooden hoop with a stick, racing it down the lane as if it were a galloping horse. His shouts attract younger followers who chase after, giggling, until the hoop collides with a pig. The pig, insulted squeals and bolts scattering laundry and alarming the hens. Now the whole lane is chaos. Children shrieking, women yelling, animals protesting. The pig finally vanishes into a thicket, and the hoop is retrieved, slightly dented but still serviceable. The boy grins proudly, as if orchestrating pandemonium counts as an achievement, which, in a medieval village, it rather does. Chores take on the shape of games when necessity allows. Girls gathering herbs pretend to be healers, assigning roles as patients and saints. One limps dramatically, groaning that her leg has been cursed. Another solemnly waves a bunch of rosemary over her head and declares her cured. The performance ends with laughter, though beneath it lies an education. The herbs they handle today may one day save a fevered child or soothe a difficult birth. Play and survival mingle in ways no one bothers to separate. Yet not all tasks are softened by laughter. Some children herd geese with long sticks, a job no one envies. Geese are notoriously aggressive, hissing like tiny dragons and lunging at bare legs. The children brandish their sticks like swords, retreating more often than advancing, their cries half battle, half plea for rescue. At least when they return with the flock intact, they can boast of survival like miniature warriors. You watch a girl scarcely more than 6 carefully scrape dung into a wicker basket. Her face is pinched, but her hands move with efficiency. Dung fuels the hearth, fertilizes fields, and keeps the cycle of life grinding forward. It is unpleasant work, but it earns her a nod from her mother, and that nod is worth more than complaint. Childhood here is less about escaping filth than learning to turn filth into fuel. Still, amid all this, labour imagination sparks. A group of children gathers near the green, building miniature houses from twigs and daub. They construct tiny villages within their village, complete with stick fences and pebble animals. One insists on being lord of the manor, demanding tithes in the form of berries. Another rebels, declaring independence, and soon a mock battle erupts. The twigs collapse, the berries are squashed, and the children collapse in giggles, their laughter ringing like bells. Even rebellion is rehearsed early, though the stakes are small. Of course, accidents are inevitable. A boy carrying water trips over a root, soaking himself and half the lane. The villagers groan, not out of cruelty, but because wasted water means another trip to the well. He sits in the mud, dripping and mortified, until a girl throws a stick at him and declares he looks like a drowned rat. The nickname will follow him for weeks. Medieval children may lack toys, but they never lack nicknames. Sometimes, in the middle of chores, the children simply stop and stare at the world. A butterfly drifts across the lane, and suddenly 3 pairs of eyes are locked on its shimmering wings. They chase it clumsily, knocking into each other, until it vanishes into the hedge. Their laughter fades into quiet awe. Even here, surrounded by mud and toil, the small miracles of nature still hold power. The day stretches onward, and with it the children's energy dips. Some curl up in doorways, straw dolls clutched in tired hands, while their siblings press on with chores. A toddler gnaws on a crust of bread, wide-eyed as chickens strut boldly past. A mother sings softly while spinning wool, her song a lullaby and a command all at once. Childhood here is woven from work and wonder, discipline and delight, exhaustion and sudden bursts of wild play. Yet you sense, walking among them, that this village would collapse without these small hands. Who carries the endless buckets from the well? Who gathers firewood from the edges of the wood? Who keeps the birds at bay, herds the geese, scrapes the dung, and runs errands from cottage to cottage? It is the children, every bit as essential as the men behind ploughs and the women at hearths. They may not wield power or coin, but they hold the daily rhythm in their grubby fingers, and when dusk comes, when the fields quiet and the oxen are led home, it will be the children who tumble into straw beds first, limbs heavy with fatigue, dreams already tangled with chores they'll repeat tomorrow. Their laughter, their games, their chores, all of it is as much the village's heartbeat as the bell tolling from the church. Childhood in the medieval world is not an escape from responsibility. It is the first rehearsal for the lifelong performance of survival. If you follow the smoke curling from the low thatched roofs, you'll find the heart of every cottage, the hearth. It's more than just a fire. It's the furnace of survival, the gossip hub, the workshop, and the medieval equivalent of central heating, except with more ash in your porridge. Here, women spend hours each day bending over the flames, their faces flushed with heat, their hands busy with tasks that seem endless and yet strangely rhythmic. Stirring, spinning, mending, baking, washing, scolding. Step into a cottage and the air hits you with a thick perfume of wood smoke, boiled cabbage, and wool. It's a smell that clings to everything: hair, skin, tunics, even dreams. The hearth itself squats in the middle, smoke trickling upward toward a small hole in the roof, though much of it lingers, curling lazily like a cat too stubborn to leave. Children sit nearby, their eyes watering, while their mother stirs a pot so slowly it seems the pottage might be older than the children themselves. The pot is iron, blackened by decades of fire, its contents bubbling with beans, peas, onions, and maybe, if fortune has been kind, a scrap of bacon fat. A wooden spoon stirs it with patient circles, as though the act itself keeps time. This stew is less a recipe and more a lifestyle. Ingredients shift daily, but the pot never truly empties. It's a medieval version of all you can eat, except the menu is cabbage, cabbage, or cabbage. Beside the fire, spinning wheels creak as wool is twisted into thread. Women's hands move with a rhythm so natural it might as well be breathing. Distaffs stand like silent companions, wrapped in raw fleece waiting to be teased into string. The wool is greasy, smelling faintly of the sheep it came from, but once spun it will become cloth, cloaks, tunics, blankets. Each thread is survival wrapped thin, and each woman knows how to coax it from fleece with the kind of expertise that comes only from doing it every day, forever. And then there is the gossip. Words whirl as quickly as the spindles, stories spinning from lips while hands stay occupied. A neighbour's pig broke into someone else's garden. A husband stumbled home drunk from the alehouse. The priest's sermon last Sunday sounded suspiciously recycled from the week before. Even in an age without paper tabloids, the hearth provides headlines. If you want to know who argued, who betrothed, or who may be hiding a secret, ask the women at the fire. They will tell you, though not always in the same order. Children are rarely silent witnesses. One tugs at his mother's sleeve, asking when bread will be ready. Another tries to feed crumbs to the family cat, who bats them disdainfully before retreating to the warmest corner by the ashes. Toddlers crawl dangerously close to the fire, prompting quick grabs and sharp words. Babies fuss and women hush them with gentle rocking, their feet never stopping the treadle of the spinning wheel. It's multitasking at its most medieval. Soothe the child, stir the stew, twist the thread, and still have time to complain about your husband snoring. Laundry too falls under the realm of hearthwork. Not the tidy hum of a machine, but back-breaking scrubbing in basins filled with water hauled from the well. Clothes are beaten against stones, rubbed with lye soap that leaves hands raw, then hung on lines to dry, stiff as armour in the cold air. The steam from boiling water fills the cottage, mingling with smoke until the room feels like a reluctant sauna. Cleanliness may not be modern, but effort certainly is. Bread making is another constant. After kneading coarse dough with the arms that ache, women carry loaves to the communal oven. There they wait among neighbours, comparing notes about which child fell in the dung heap and whose goat ate the churchyard flowers. Bread is marked with unique cuts or symbols, a medieval barcode to make sure no one accidentally walks home with the wrong loaf. The oven smoulders like a dragon's mouth, swallowing dough and belching out crust. The smell of baking bread is one of the few luxuries that could rival heaven, though biting into it later, you're reminded that heaven occasionally tastes like gravel. Clothing mending happens in every spare moment. Tunics and hose don't last long against mud, thorns, or work, so women patch holes with thread spun minutes earlier. Every garment tells a story in stitches. This tear from a fall in the fields, that burn from a spark at the hearth, another patch from too much kneeling in church. Clothes may not be stylish, but they are sturdy, passed down until even the youngest child looks like he's wearing the ghost of 5 siblings. And through it all, conversation never stops. Stories weave with laughter, sighs, and occasionally sharp words. One woman swears she saw fairies at the edge of the woods. Another rolls her eyes and says it was just the miller's daughters sneaking about. Superstitions mingle with daily life like herbs in the stew. A charm hung above the hearth might ward off evil, or it might just collect dust, but no one is willing to take the risk of removing it. Afternoons often find the women outside, washing wool in cold streams until their hands ache, or laying herbs to dry on racks. Sage, thyme and rosemary dangle from beams, their scents a rare intrusion of freshness into the smoky air. Some herbs will flavour food, others will doctor illnesses, and some, at least according to whispers, will keep witches at bay. Whether the witches are real is another matter, but it's always best to stay prepared. Spinning wheels turn on, smoke rises, and the hearth glows steadily as the hours crawl by. The men in the fields may think themselves the backbone of the village, but the women at the hearth are its heartbeat. Without their endless labour, no one eats, no one stays warm, no one wears clothes that survive more than a week. Their work is repetitive, yes, but repetition builds survival the way threads build cloth. There's humour in the hearth too. A woman pulls a loaf from the oven, only to find it misshapen like the priest's nose. She holds it up to laughter, declaring it the holiest bread in the parish. Another burns her hand on the iron pot, swears loudly, then quickly mutters a prayer to cover her tracks. Even drudgery invites small jokes, because without laughter, smoke and toil would choke the spirit. As evening draws closer, women set aside spinning wheels and bring meals to the table. The hearth shifts from workshop to dining hall, its glow now a companion rather than a taskmaster. Children gather with flushed cheeks, men return mud-caked from the fields, and everyone waits as bowls are filled. The same stew, the same bread, the same ale. But here, eaten together, it feels like more than fuel. It feels like proof that the day's labour was not in vain. You sit among them, warmed by the fire, listening to chatter swirl like sparks. A cat purrs against your leg, a baby dozes against its mother's shoulder, the pot simmers with the promise of tomorrow's meal. The hearth may be smoky, sooty and exhausting, but it is also the soul of the village. Women's hands have kept it alive since dawn, and by their labour the village itself endures. Step back out of the smoky cottages, and the manor's shadow stretches across the fields, long and heavy as the bell tolling from the church. Every village has its lord, and every villager feels his presence, whether he's actually at home or off chasing tournaments, debts, or some poor dear who never signed up to be entertainment. The manor is not just a house, it's a statement, perched on a rise like a smug cat watching mice scurry below. Its timber beams and stone foundations look alien compared to the crooked mud and thatch cottages. Where the village huddles, the manor looms. You can't walk a lane without brushing against obligations to it. Every acre ploughed, every sheaf of wheat gathered, every pig slaughtered. The Lord expects a slice. Tithes and rents hang over villagers like smoke in the rafters, inescapable and thick. It doesn't matter that you dragged the plough until your shoulders ached, or that your wife spun wool until her fingertips bled. A portion of that labour belongs not to you, but to the manor. Think of it as a subscription service you never asked for, with very steep late fees. The reeve enforces this rhythm, riding up and down the lanes with the kind of authority that comes from knowing he represents the one man no villager dares to defy. He's usually a villager himself, chosen to keep order, which means he gets to irritate his neighbours professionally instead of just socially. He counts sheaves, checks fences, and inspects whether a tenant has been tending the Lord's land with the same enthusiasm as his own. If not, fines follow, swift and painful. Medieval fines don't come as polite letters. They arrive as public humiliation, missing coins, or in some cases the stocks. And then there's the church, always hovering. Alongside the manor, like two parents squabbling over who gets custody of your soul. The tithe claims 1/10 of everything. Crops, livestock, even the honey scraped from hives. Villagers grumble, but they pay, because no one wants to risk eternal damnation over a basket of turnips. Priests might not wield swords, but their sermons carry sharp edges. If you don't give, God might just let your next harvest rot. Medieval motivation is equal parts faith and fear, stirred well and served weakly. On certain days, labour shifts from your own land to the Lord's domain, fields kept solely for his profit. There, villagers work under watchful eyes, their sweat fueling someone else's table. It's a bitter trade, but resistance isn't really an option. Try skipping and you'll meet the reeve's wrath, or worse, the bailiff's. The bailiff is the enforcer with a talent for sniffing out laziness. He arrives at dawn, cloak swirling, face smug, and somehow always manages to catch you the one time you pause to scratch your nose. His gaze alone feels like punishment, yet villagers endure it, grumbling as they dig, weed, and reap for a lord who may not even remember their names. Work on the domain carries a different flavour, heavier, somehow, as though the soil itself knows you won't eat what grows from it. The crops will fill the manor's barns, feed its guests, fatten its hounds. Your belly will get only the memory of effort. And still, the fields must be tilled, because the system runs on obedience, not fairness. But obligations aren't only about crops. The manor calls upon villagers for corvée labour, mending roads, building fences, repairing bridges. If the Lord needs a new barn roof, villagers climb ladders and thatch it. If the moat fills with muck, villagers shovel it out. It's communal effort without communal benefit, the medieval version of team-building exercises, except the reward is not pizza but fewer lashes. Taxes take strange shapes. There's the Heriot, a death duty demanding your best beast when you die. As if grieving your loss isn't enough, the manor also needs your cow. There are fees for using the mill, the oven, the wine press. Want to grind your own grain? Too bad. That's the Lord's monopoly. Even death itself is taxed. Funerals cost coin. It's as if the system runs on the principle that existence alone is billable. Still, it's not all oppression. Sometimes the Lord hosts feasts, inviting tenants to tables laden with roasted meats and ale flowing freely. For one night, the villagers glimpse abundance. The hall blazes with torches, music rattles the rafters, and even the reeve looks less smug after a few cups. But the feast is fleeting, like a dream. By dawn, it's back to obligations, back to labour, back to smoke and mud. The manor giveth, the manor taketh away. Religion too casts its weight. Bells summon you not only to prayer but to penance. Feast days punctuate the calendar, offering pauses in labour but also reinforcing the church's authority. Saints' relics gleam in dim chapels, bones wrapped in silk, drawing awe and the occasional sceptical side-eye. Villagers kneel, cross themselves, murmur prayers in Latin they don't fully understand. But faith isn't about comprehension. It's about rhythm, ritual, reassurance. The church promises eternal reward, and in a world where daily life feels like penance, that promise carries weight. Superstitions mingle freely with official doctrine. A villager pays his tithe in grain, then whispers a charm against the evil eye over his children. A woman crosses herself in church, then hangs garlic over her door to keep away wandering spirits. No one sees contradiction. In a medieval village, belief is a stew. Saints, charms, prayers, and herbs simmering together, each ingredient reinforcing the hope that tomorrow won't collapse. Everywhere you look, obligation presses in. You patch your roof, knowing you'll owe labour on the manor's barn next week. You bake your bread, knowing the church expects its share. You tend your cow, knowing the Heriot will claim it when you die. Freedom in this world is not absence of duty, but survival within it. And yet, within those obligations, people carve out resilience. They joke about the reeve's bowlegs, they smuggle an extra egg past the tithe collector, they whisper complaints in the alehouse where no priest listens. Humour becomes rebellion, laughter the one tax-free currency. When a lord raises rents, someone mutters that he must be planning to pave the road with gold, and the whole lane snickers. Jokes can't undo obligations, but they soften them. A spoonful of sarcasm with every mouthful of duty. As you walk back through the lanes, you notice how the manor's shadow literally falls over cottages in the evening, long and dark. It's a fitting image, the power of the Lord stretching over every villager's life. But then you also notice the glow of hearth fires, smoke curling stubbornly into the air. Those small flames are quiet rebellions, proof that despite rent, tithes and fines, the villagers endure. Their work, their prayers, their laughter, all of it keeps the rhythm steady even under weight. By dusk the manor still looms, the church still towers, the reeve still prowls. Yet inside cottages, bowls of pottage are shared, bread is broken, and stories are told. Obligation may be the skeleton of village life, but warmth, faith, and humour flesh it out. Without those, no one could bear the shadow. With them, the village endures, its heartbeat steady, its spirit quietly unbroken. The lane outside the cottages is never truly quiet, because animals refuse to keep silence. Step outside after the morning chores, and you'll find yourself dodging pigs, geese, chickens, dogs, and at least one ox who looks convinced that the lane belongs to him personally. Animals aren't just background here. They are the economy, the alarm clocks, the trash collectors, and sometimes the neighbourhood bullies. Every medieval villager's life is tangled with theirs, for better or worse, usually both. Start with the sheep. White bundles with faces that look permanently unimpressed. They graze in the meadows just beyond the hedges. Sheep are gold on 4 legs, not because of meat, but because of wool. Every cloak, every blanket, every hood in the village owes its existence to a sheep chewing grass somewhere. Their fleece is greasy with lanolin, soft to the touch but smelling faintly of damp animal and rain. Shearing day is both festival and battlefield, with men pinning squirming sheep, shears flashing, wool tumbling to the ground in matted heaps. Children laugh at the animal's newly naked appearance, while the sheep glare back as if plotting revenge. And they probably are. Anyone who's wrestled a sheep knows the creatures harbour grudges. Then come the pigs, the unruly kings of chaos. They root in middens, snuffle under hedges, and escape pens with the determination of professional escape artists. A pig in the lane is both food on hooves and walking disaster. They'll devour scraps, dig up gardens, and knock over barrels with glee. Their squeals split the air, a sound so piercing it could probably summon saints from heaven. Still, pigs are beloved in their way, because every pound of their flesh translates into meat, lard, and soap. You may curse when they topple your firewood pile, but come winter, you'll thank them with your stomach. The oxen, meanwhile, plod with slow majesty. These hulking beasts are the engines of agriculture, dragging ploughs and carts with patience bordering on saintly, until they decide they've had enough. Then they plant their hooves in mud and stare at you as if to say, "Move me yourself." Their eyes are large and mournful, their hides thick with flies, their tails swishing lazily as if batting away your complaints. Oxen are not glamorous, but without them, furrows would remain uncut and wagons unmoved. They are the quiet muscle beneath the entire village, and they know it. Chickens scatter everywhere, pecking at dust, squabbling over crumbs, laying eggs in places so secret even medieval detectives would fail to locate them. Their clucks fill the air like background music, sometimes soothing, sometimes irritating enough to make you consider vegetarianism centuries before it becomes trendy. Eggs are precious. Protein, currency, and sometimes offerings to neighbours or priest. But catching a hen determined not to be caught is a sport more exhausting than ploughing. Chickens are deceptively fast, slippery as eels, and always seem to sense when you're wearing your best tunic. Geese, though, geese are the real menace. Their long necks, hissing beaks, and beady eyes turn them into feathered guards of the village. They honk at strangers, chase children, and bite ankles with the precision of professional soldiers. People keep them for meat, eggs, and down, but also for security. A flock of geese can out-alarm any dog shrieking loud enough to wake the reeve from 3 fields away. Villagers respect them, fear them, and secretly plot recipes for them when they've had a particularly aggressive day. Dogs weave among all this, half pets, half workers. They guard flocks, chase vermin, and hover under tables waiting for scraps. Medieval dogs aren't pampered lap creatures. They're lean, scrappy, and clever. Their loyalty is practical. Feed them, and they'll protect your sheep. Forget them, and they'll steal your dinner. Cats, on the other hand, slink about with less obvious devotion. They stalk mice in barns, flick their tails disdainfully at humans, and accept affection only when it suits them. The church sometimes frowns on cats, muttering about witchcraft, but villagers know better. Without cats, grain stores would be rodent buffers. Animal care fills every spare moment. Sheep must be herded, pigs penned, oxen fed, hens coaxed into nesting, geese corralled before they mount a coup. Children often handle the smaller beasts, learning quickly that a goose bite stings worse than a sibling's punch. Men lead oxen to pasture with ropes, muttering curses when they stray. Women toss scraps to pigs, scatter grain for chickens, and sigh at the endless mud tracked back indoors. It's not glamorous, but without animals there would be no food, no wool, no leather, no trade. Still, the relationship isn't purely practical. Villagers name their animals, talk to them, scold them, even pray for them. A cow that gives steady milk is cherished almost like family. A dog that guards sheep faithfully is praised as if it understands every word. When animals die, there's sorrow, even amid relief at the food they provide. Bonds form quietly, between muck and mud, between chores and chaos. Humans and beasts survive together, bound by necessity and affection. Accidents are inevitable. A piglet tumbles into a ditch, squealing until half the lane shows up to haul it out. A sheep bolts into the churchyard during Mass, scattering parishioners before being dragged away by red-faced children. An ox refuses to cross a stream, holding up the entire plough team while villagers debate whether to push, pull, or bribe it with turnips. Animals write their own comedy into village life, and everyone learns to laugh even as they grumble. The smells are unforgettable. A barnyard mixes hay, dung, and the musk of animals into a perfume no candle can mask. It clings to boots, tunics, and hair. Villagers hardly notice. It is the scent of survival, of food to come, of wool waiting to be spun. To outsiders it reeks. To those who live within it, it is simply life. By afternoon, animals retreat to shade or pens, panting in the heat. Villagers check hooves, mend fences, scatter feed. Children collapse on hay bales, exhausted from chasing stubborn. Geese, while dogs sprawl in dust with tongues lolling. The fields hum with insects, the barns with quiet chewing, the air with the rhythm of a community bound tightly to its beasts, and when night falls, the bond deepens. Cows low softly in their stalls, sheep huddle for warmth, pigs snore like drunken neighbours, and geese keep one wary eye open. In cottages, villagers listen to the sounds through the walls, a reminder that their animals, loud and unruly though they are lifelines sleeping close by. Without them there would be no village at all. By the time the sun tips toward its highest point, backs ache, bellies grumble, and the village begins to slow. Noon isn't celebrated with trumpets or roasted feasts. It's marked by the sight of weary figures sinking onto grassy banks, leaning against hedges, or crouching in the furrows with baskets of food balanced beside them. Midday is less about relaxation than survival, but it still carries a flavour of reprieve. Bread, cheese, and weary feet. These are the holy trinity of the medieval lunch hour. You sit on a patch of grass that feels lumpier than it looks. The ground is damp, but you hardly notice. Every inch of your body welcomes the chance to stop moving. A rough cloth is spread on the ground, and out come the same foods you tasted at dawn. Bread, still hard enough to chip a tooth, but mercifully softened by dunking into ale. Cheese, crumbly, salty, and faintly reminiscent of the cow that produced it. And sometimes a hunk of onion or radish to cut through the monotony. If fortune has been kind, someone unwraps a sliver of cured bacon, and suddenly you understand why feast days are considered miracles. The bread is dark, heavy, made of rye or barley, with the occasional pebble still lurking inside like a medieval surprise toy. You chew carefully, half expecting to break a molar. Still, the hunger gnawing at your stomach turns even this into comfort. Cheese is no delicacy, but it's nourishment. It smells sharp, tastes sharp, and leaves a film on your tongue that lingers long after you swallow. You wash it down with ale, the same weak, cloudy brew that has been hydrating peasants for centuries. It isn't delicious, but it doesn't kill you, and that's the highest culinary praise the medieval world can offer. Around you, men stretch their legs, grunting as if every joint has developed its own opinion. Women unwrap their cloth bundles, feeding children who dart back and forth between bites and games. Children are rarely still. They cram crusts into mouths, then chase each other through the furrows until a parent barks at them to sit down before they trample seedlings. Dogs circle hungrily, eyes fixed on any crumb, tails wagging like windmills. Chickens peck boldly near the edge of the group, and someone shoos them away with half-hearted annoyance. Conversation trickles like ale from a leaky jug. Topics are predictable. The soil, the weather, whose oxen seem lazy. This week, and whether the priest's sermon actually made sense or if he was just recycling last Sunday's material. Someone jokes that his oxen move slower than the reeve's brain, drawing muffled laughter. Humour at the expense of authority is a favourite seasoning at midday, though it's always kept just quiet enough to avoid trouble. Feet are bared, boots tugged off, toes stretched in the sun. Blisters and sores are compared like battle scars, each villager swearing their own pair of shoes is the worst in the parish. A woman rubs her ankles and mutters that if God intended humans to walk all day, he would have given them hooves. The remark earns chuckles, and someone else adds that maybe the oxen should pay tithe since they do half the work. Even exhaustion can't keep sarcasm from sprouting in the fields. The air carries the warm scents of crushed grass, sweat and cheese, unwrapped too long in the sun. Bees buzz lazily, hovering near the baskets, drawn by the faint sweetness of honey spread on rare slices of bread. The sun presses down, heavy but comforting, as if insisting that rest is not a sin. For once, villagers allow themselves to believe it. Still, the meal is not indulgent. Every bite is calculated to stretch. A loaf might feed a family all day, so portions are measured with care. Children protest, eyes pleading for bigger slices, but their parents shake their heads. Bread is coin in edible form too precious to squander. Cheese is rationed, onions sliced thin, ale shared sparingly. No one leaves full, they leave less empty. Sometimes the pause brings music. A boy produces a crude whistle and pipes a tune that wobbles like a drunk goose, but the rhythm is familiar enough to make heads nod. A girl claps along, laughter bubbling from her like spring water. For a few moments, the field feels less like a workplace and more like a gathering, united not by duty but by sound. Then the whistle squeaks, the girl loses the beat, and everyone collapses in laughter before resuming their meal. The midday rest is also when small stories bloom. An old man tells of a harvest 30 years ago when hail flattened every stalk, but somehow a single sheaf was spared, standing tall like a miracle. A woman recalls the time a fox stole a hen in broad daylight, bold as a tax collector. Children listen wide-eyed, bread halfway to their mouths, as if even misfortune becomes entertainment when retold at midday. And of course, there's the inevitable nap. A man leans back against a hedge, hat tilted over his face, snoring softly within minutes. His wife rolls her eyes and mutters that he works harder at sleeping than at ploughing. No one wakes him. Everyone envies him. Sleep in daylight is a luxury stolen from time, and in the rhythm of medieval life, even a quarter hour of rest feels like treasure. When the baskets empty and the ale flasks run dry, villagers linger for a heartbeat longer, reluctant to rise. The sun, warm on shoulders, lulls them into dreaming of a world where work pauses forever. But the oxen shift, the shadows creep, and reality insists. Slowly boots are pulled back on, tools retrieved, baskets folded. The brief reprieve is over. As you stand, stretching stiff muscles, you realise the importance of this pause. It isn't about the food, meagre though it is. It's about the chance to breathe, to laugh, to share burdens over crust of bread. Without this daily pause, the grind of labour would crush even the strongest. Midday is the hinge on which the entire day swings, a moment to balance before plunging back into toil. The last crumbs are brushed from tunics, the dogs snap up scraps, and children are herded back into line. The fields await, furrows gaping like mouths to be fed. You sling your basket back over your shoulder, wipe sweat from your brow, and step once more into the rhythm of plough, hoe, and harvest. The sun glares overhead, the earth waits, and your belly, though not full, is just steady enough to continue. Bread, cheese, and weary feet. They are the fuel that keeps the village alive until dusk. If the fields are the lungs of the village, then the green at its centre is the heart. By afternoon, when the sun has tilted west and the worst edge of labour has dulled, you hear the clang of hammer on iron and the splash of water in the mill race. Life shifts from ploughing to crafting, trading, and fixing, the quieter, though no less vital, part of survival. Walk toward the green, and you can taste the rhythm change. The grunts of oxen are replaced by the ring of anvils, the chatter of barter, the hiss of grinding millstones. The blacksmith's forge glows first. You step into the shed, and the air thickens immediately, hot and acrid, heavy with coal smoke and singed metal. Sparks leap like fireflies, bursting around the figure bent over the anvil. His hammer rises and falls with a rhythm older than memory. Clang, hiss, clang. The sound echoes across the lane, so steady you could almost mistake it for a heartbeat. The smith's arms gleam with sweat, his face streaked with soot, and his apron looks as if it's been through more battles than any knight. Villagers bring him work, a ploughshare cracked against a stone, a hinge snapped from a door, a hoe bent in stubborn soil. He takes each piece with a grunt, slams it onto the anvil, and coaxes it back to life. Iron is expensive, too dear to waste. Tools are patched, reforged, reborn, until they carry more repairs than original metal. You watch a farmer hold his mended plough like it's a newborn child, patting the smith's shoulder in gratitude. Payment may come in coin, but often it's bread, cheese, or a promise of wool. The smith shrugs. In a village economy, survival is currency enough. Step outside and follow the sound of water and you'll find the mill. Its wheel creaks as the stream pushes it round and round, a groaning, splashing giant at the edge of the village. Inside, millstones grind ceaselessly, their low rumble vibrating in your bones. Grain pours between them, vanishing as flour bursts out in puffs that coat everything. Floor, walls, clothes, lungs. The miller coughs constantly, his hair and beard ghostly white, as if flour itself has claimed him. Villagers wait with sacks of grain, watching jealously to make sure no handful disappears into the miller's private stores. Millers have a reputation for skimming, and jokes about their honesty are as common as stones in bread. The smell inside is intoxicating, warm, dusty, and faintly nutty, a reminder of bread yet to come. Women heft heavy sacks, their arms trembling, while children scramble after stray grains spilled on the floor. Payment for milling is unavoidable. It's another monopoly of the manor. Some grumble, but without the wheel, their grain would remain stubborn kernels instead of flour. So they pay, muttering curses under their breath, while the wheel turns on, uncaring. Beyond the forge and mill, the green itself hums with barter. Villagers spread out goods on cloths, baskets woven from willow, pots shaped from local clay, thread spun from wool, herbs tied in bundles. There is no glittering market square with marble fountains here, only grass, mud, and voices. One man offers onions for salt, a woman trades wool for honey, a boy hands over eggs in exchange for a pair of leather straps. It's barter at its purest, haggling carried out with shrugs and smiles, sometimes with sharp words, always with the knowledge that tomorrow the roles may reverse. The air smells of earth and livestock, overlaid with the faint sweetness of beeswax candles sold by a widow who keeps hives at the edge of the wood. Children dart between adults, clutching small treasures, a carved whistle, a scrap of ribbon, a pebble painted like a saint. Dogs patrol for dropped crumbs, occasionally chased off by geese whose owners have tethered them to stakes like feathered watchdogs. The green is noisy, messy, alive, and beneath it, a system of trust older than coin. Craftsmen other than the smith make their mark here too. The carpenter displays stools and wheels, each smoothed with care. His hands are nicked, his tunic dusted with shavings, and his tools gleam from constant use. Without him, carts would collapse, doors would sag, tables would splinter. A potter sets out earthenware jugs, their reddish clay shining faintly. They are not perfect. One leans a little, another bears a crack. But they hold water, ale, and pottage, and that is what matters. Perfection is for monasteries. Villages require only endurance. Even entertainment creeps in. A travelling peddler might arrive, cloak dusty, donkey laden with trinkets, pins, combs, bright ribbons, perhaps even a scrap of tin polished to mirror shine. He shouts louder than anyone else, promising marvels, boasting of distant towns where streets are wider and bread whiter. Villagers gather, half sceptical, half enchanted, fingering the trinkets as though touching a piece of another world. Few can afford much, but even to see these items is a taste of elsewhere. Gossip thrives here more than at the hearth. Who traded what? Who paid fairly? Who walked away muttering? A woman swears she saw the reeve buying honey without paying in coin, only in promises. Another whispers that the miller's daughter has been walking with the shepherd too often. News spreads faster than flour dust, weaving through the crowd until everyone knows everything, or at least a version of it. As the afternoon wanes, the green grows louder. Bargains become more desperate, voices rise, haggling sharpens. A farmer insists his onions are worth more. A weaver argues her wool is finer. Children squabble over marbles carved from bone. A goose breaks free and charges, scattering coins, baskets, and dignity. For a moment, chaos rules, but then it settles again, laughter bubbling up to replace irritation. This, too, is part of the rhythm. When the sun dips lower, villagers gather their goods, sling baskets over shoulders, and drift back to cottages. The blacksmith banks the forge, the mill wheel creaks to a slower pace, the green empties except for a few hens pecking at crumbs. The heart of the village quiets, though its pulse never stops. Tomorrow the same crafts, trades and barters will return steady as breath. And as you walk away you realise that this, more than any feast or sermon, is what binds the village. The forge sparks tools back to life. The mill grinds grain to bread. The barter fills gaps no family could fill alone. It is the silent web holding everyone together, spun not of silk but of need, trust, and habit. The fields may feed the body, but the crafts and barter feed the village itself, keeping it alive, connected, stubbornly human. By late afternoon, when the sun slants across the fields and paints long shadows over the cottages, the sounds drifting from the alehouse begin to carry. A low hum of laughter, the occasional thud of a tankard on wood, and sometimes a cheer or groan that suggests dice have just rolled in someone's favour, or against it. If the church bell dictates the rhythm of piety, the tavern sets the rhythm of release. And though the ale is weak and the bench is hard, this is the place where villagers briefly forget the mud on their boots and the rents in their pockets. The tavern isn't grand. It's a squat timbered building, its beams dark with smoke and ale stains older than anyone alive. The roof leans slightly, as though it too had one too many pints. A crude sign swings outside, painted with an animal or symbol that might once have been clear, but now looks like a bad doodle. Inside, the floor is beaten earth, the table scarred and sticky, the air dense with smoke, sweat, and spilled drink. It is not glamorous, but glamour is not the point. Here, you come to be human, loudly and unashamedly, in a world that demands silence and obedience by day. You duck under the low doorway, blinking as the dimness swallows you. Candles flicker in iron sconces, shadows twitching on walls plastered with grime. The hearth roars, its heat competing with the scent of ale, sour and sweet all at once. Tankards clatter as they're slammed onto tables, benches scrape, dice rattle across wood. The innkeeper's wife bustles about with jugs, her apron permanently stained, but her hands quick as hawks. She knows exactly who pays on time, who owes, and who tries to sneak out after just one drink. Her gaze alone could sober a man, though not for long. The ale flows, though Ale might be a generous word. It's small beer, weak enough that children sip it at meals, but in the tavern it somehow seems stronger. Perhaps it's the atmosphere, perhaps the company, or perhaps the illusion that this tankard is different from the one at your cottage. It foams, it sloshes, it spills down chins and onto tunics, and no one minds. After a day of labour, even cloudy ale tastes like a feast. Dice games spring up at every table. Wooden cubes clatter, shouts rise, coins or scraps of goods pile in the centre. A man curses his luck when his roll betrays him, swears the dice are bewitched and demands another throw. His neighbour laughs, claims divine blessing, and sweeps the winnings into his pouch. The reeve, if present, always seems suspiciously lucky. People grumble but keep playing, because hope is addictive even when the odds are against you. In a corner, men mutter over gossip too bold for the daylight lanes. Someone swears a tax collector was robbed on the road. Someone else whispers of outlaws in the woods who might be Robin Hood's kin, or at least like to say they are. Another insists he saw lights in the forest at night, proof of fairies or smugglers, depending on whether you believe in magic or human greed. The tavern is the medieval internet. Rumours spread fast, facts are optional, entertainment guaranteed. Laughter erupts when a farmer stands and begins to sing, voice rough but enthusiastic. The song is old, about a maiden, a knight, and a pig that wouldn't stay penned. Verses multiply with each tankard, the pig growing fatter, the knight more foolish, the maiden less patient. Soon the entire room is bellowing the chorus, slapping tables in rhythm, until even the innkeeper cracks a grin. Music binds the room together, every voice a thread in the tapestry of noise. Women are present too, though fewer. Some help serve, others sit at tables, tankards in hand, joining in the laughter. They trade gossip as swiftly as the men, sometimes sharper, their words cutting like knives wrapped in smiles. Children sometimes lurk near the door, wide-eyed, hoping for a crust or a story before being shooed home. For them, the tavern is both forbidden and magnetic, a glimpse into the noisy world of adults. Not everything is merry. Alehouses breed. Quarrels as surely as fields breed weeds. A spilled drink, a lost coin, a mocking word. Suddenly benches overturn, fists fly, and the room roars with chaos. Fights are messy, more grappling than striking, until someone is dragged outside and dumped in the mud to cool off. Villagers step over him with barely a glance. By morning he'll limp back to work, nursing bruises and pride. In truth, the violence is less dangerous than the debts. Alehouse credit can trap a family in hunger faster than a fistfight ever could. The priest, of course, preaches against the tavern, condemning dice and drink as roads to sin. His words echo in the church, but here in the smoky warmth, few remember them. Or if they do, they laugh, gently, not cruelly, as if even God might understand the need for a little ale after 14 hours in the fields. Faith governs life, but even saints would want to sit by this fire. Still, the tavern is more than escape. It is where alliances are forged, bargains struck, marriages whispered into being. A man borrows coin from his neighbour, promising repayment at harvest. Two families agree to share labour in exchange for a goat. A betrothal is arranged with a handshake over a tankard. Business and pleasure intertwine seamlessly, because in a village there is no separating them. Every word has weight, every promise an echo that may return months later. As night creeps closer, the alehouse grows louder. The singing gets sloppier, the dice rolls wilder, the laughter sharper. A goose somehow wanders in, no one knows from where, and chaos ensues until it's chased back outside, hissing like the voice of the priest himself. Tankards clatter, a man snores on the bench, another climbs onto the table to declare himself king of pottage before promptly falling off. It is rowdy, it is foolish, and it is utterly human. By the time the innkeeper dims the hearth and herds the last stragglers out, the village is wrapped in night. Figures stagger home, voices still rising in half-remembered songs, while others slip quietly into cottages hoping their wives are asleep. The green empties, the dice fall silent, and the alehouse settles into smoky stillness, waiting for tomorrow when it will pulse again with noise and need. You step back into the cool night, ears still ringing, belly warmed by ale. The tavern behind you may be crooked, smoky, and loud, but it is also the soul's reprieve, a reminder that even in a life of toil, villagers demand laughter, stories, and the company of friends. The church may save your soul for eternity, but tonight, the alehouse saves your spirit just enough to face tomorrow. The tavern may claim the body for an evening, but the church always reclaims the soul by morning. Faith soaks the village as thoroughly as rain soaks the fields, and its presence is visible everywhere you turn. Bells toll from the squat stone tower, their sound rolling over cottages, barns and hedges until even the yard oxen pause in their chewing. Each peal is a reminder. No matter how many hours you give to fields, manor or hearth, a portion of your life belongs to heaven. Step into the church and the air cools immediately. Thick stone walls hold dampness like a sponge, so the scent is always the same. Beeswax, mildew and faint traces of incense. Candles gutter on a simple altar, wax pooling into hardened lumps like melted ghosts. The walls are painted with fading saints, whose faces have been half rubbed away by centuries of candle smoke. Their eyes still follow you, though, stern and strangely patient, as if judging whether your piety measures up, or if you're just hoping for shorter sermons. Villagers gather here at dawn and dusk, pressed shoulder to shoulder, their breath forming a mist that rises into rafters dark with soot. Latin chants drone, unintelligible to most, but rhythm matters more than meaning. The priest intones phrases from memory, rolling them off his tongue like a man who knows the exact moment everyone stops listening. Still, the villagers murmur responses, bow heads, cross chests. Faith is less about comprehension than participation. To pray is to belong, even if you don't know precisely what you're saying. On Sundays, the service stretches longer, as though heaven has instituted over time. The whole village turns out, wearing tunics brushed and patched, faces scrubbed cleaner than usual. Families file into pews, children fidgeting, women shushing, men pretending not to doze. The priest preaches about sin and salvation, weaving warnings of hell with promises of paradise. Sometimes he rails against dice and ale, sometimes he warns against witches lurking at the forest edge. His words are fire and brimstone, yet villagers nod solemnly even if half are secretly wondering whether their chickens have laid yet. Outside, the churchyard serves as both cemetery and gathering place. Stones tilt crookedly, names fading under moss, while flowers and herbs sprout from graves tended by wives and daughters. Villagers linger after Mass, gossiping in lowered tones that somehow carry farther than the sermons. Births, betrothals, deaths, debts, all are discussed here, beneath the shadow of the cross. Children play tag between tombstones until scolded, laughter clashing with mourning but never truly silenced. For the living, the churchyard is as much about community as about eternity. Faith threads itself into every daily act. Before a plough bites into soil, a farmer makes the sign of the cross, muttering a prayer that the furrow will yield. Women whisper blessings over their bread before placing it in the oven, hoping saints will keep it from burning. Children recite the Pater Noster before bed, some stumbling over words, others whispering so fast it sounds more like a spell than a prayer. Belief is woven into routine, less spectacular miracle than constant hum. Saints adorn walls and imaginations alike. St. Christopher watches over travellers. St. Apollonia is begged to ease aching teeth. St. Blai hears prayers for throats sore from winter cold. Relics, sometimes bones, sometimes scraps of cloth, are treasured as though they hold direct lines to heaven. The priest displays them with care, candles gleaming on their cases, villagers crossing themselves fervently. Even if you doubt the authenticity of a rib that looks suspiciously like a chicken bone, you don't dare say so aloud. Better to be safe than heretical. Superstitions seep in too, no matter how sternly priests scowl. A woman ties a sprig of rosemary above her doorway to keep out spirits. A farmer buries a charm in his field for fertility. Mothers hang amulets around babies' necks, combining saints' names with herbs thought to repel sickness. The church insists faith alone is enough, but villagers know the world is dangerous, and a little extra insurance can't hurt. God may rule heaven, but garlic rules the threshold. Feast days punctuate the year, breaking the monotony of toil. Bells peal longer, priests don brighter robes, villagers process through lanes with candles and banners. Music drifts from crude instruments, fiddles, flutes, drums, while tables groan with food spared for celebration. It is not mere indulgence, it is affirmation. To feast is to declare that survival has held another season, that God has blessed, however briefly. Even if the bread is coarse and the ale weak, on feast days it tastes like abundance. But faith is not all joy. Fear creeps close too. Every illness sparks whispers of God's punishment. A cow that dies suddenly may be blamed on sin left unconfessed. Drought or storm is seen as divine displeasure, a sign that someone, perhaps you, perhaps your neighbour, has angered heaven. Confession becomes more than ritual. It is protection, a way of ensuring your secrets don't drag the entire village into famine. The church enforces not only belief but order. Marriage, inheritance, even disputes over land fall under its shadow. Priests record names, births, deaths, serving as the village's memory. Without them, families vanish into forgetfulness. The church is both cradle and grave, book and judge. You cannot escape it any more than you can escape hunger. And yet, despite its power, villagers find humour in it. Someone jokes that the priest preaches against gluttony because he's the only one fat enough to know what it feels like. Another whispers that the bell rings louder on days when the sexton is hungover. Children mimic the priest's Latin behind hedges, turning sacred words into gibberish. Faith may demand reverence, but laughter still sneaks in, cheeky as a stray dog. As dusk falls, candles flicker brighter inside the church, glowing through narrow windows like eyes in the dark. The bell tolls once more, summoning evening prayer. Villagers shuffle in, weary but obedient, kneeling on floors cold enough to numb knees. The priest raises his voice, the congregation murmurs back, and for a few minutes the world feels ordered, structured, safe. Outside, wolves may howl, debts may loom, crops may fail, but here, inside these damp stone walls, the promise of heaven steadies hearts. You walk back through the churchyard, past leaning stones and whispering grass. Faith has no ending here. It circles, day to night, work to prayer, sin to forgiveness. The church's bells mark time more faithfully than the sun, each toll a reminder that life is fleeting, eternity endless, and survival in between a balance of labour and belief. The tavern may give laughter, the hearth warmth, the fields bread. But it is the church that offers meaning, or at least insists upon it stern and steady, in the midst of mud, toil and fleeting joy. If the church gave villagers their prayers and fears, the feast gave them their release. Weddings, festivals, saint days, and harvest celebrations brought a rare shimmer of colour into lives that were otherwise painted mostly in mud brown and smoke grey. And though food was scarce, money scarcer, and work relentless, these moments of gathering carried such weight that people would sacrifice weeks of comfort for a single night of joy. Imagine the village green, usually the stage for barter and gossip, suddenly transformed into a place where torches flare, music rattles through the air and the steady rhythm of toil pauses long enough to let laughter breathe. Weddings were the crown jewel of village gatherings. They weren't elegant affairs with delicate embroidery and string quartets. They were noisy, chaotic and hearty, designed less for sentiment and more for survival. Marriage was as much a contract as a romance, joining families, fields and fortunes together under the eyes of God and the scrutiny of every gossiping neighbour. By the time the bride stepped onto the green, dressed in her best tunic, which might simply mean it had more patches than holes, the whole community buzzed. The groom often looked nervous, not because of vows, but because of the stairs. Entire villages turned out, and there is no critic harsher than a grandmother with sharp elbows and sharper opinions. The priest mumbled Latin prayers, sprinkled holy water that looked suspiciously like last week's ale, and declared the pair bound. Villagers cheered, some sincerely, others already calculating the new economic ties this union created. The couple kissed, sometimes shyly, sometimes with enough enthusiasm to make the priest cough disapprovingly. And then came the feast. Every household contributed, a loaf of bread here, a jug of ale there, perhaps a rare slab of pork if fortune had smiled. Tables were cobbled together from planks balanced on barrels, and they sagged under the collective effort. Bowls of pottage, roasted fowl, cheese, apples, honey cakes if luck held, all piled up in glorious disorder. For once, bellies were not merely filled, but stuffed, and villagers ate until belts strained. You could almost hear the collective sigh of relief as hunger loosened its grip, even if only for one night. Music followed food. Fiddles screeched, drums thumped, flutes whined. The musicians were rarely skilled, but they were always loud, and that counted more. Villagers danced in circles, hands clasped, feet stamping mud into patterns the saints surely disapproved of. Children whirled until they toppled into heaps of giggles. Elders clapped along, and the green shook with movement. The bride was swept into the centre, spun by relatives and friends until she stumbled, laughing. The groom tried to keep pace, often failing spectacularly, which only fueled more laughter. Weddings weren't measured in elegance, but in the volume of joy. Games erupted between dances. Wrestling matches in the grass drew crowds of shouting onlookers. Dice rattled on overturned barrels. A game of quarterstaff sparring sent two men tumbling into a basket of apples, much to the delight of the children who swooped in to steal the bruised spoils. Competitions of strength, speed, or luck flourished, each ending with cheers, groans, and the occasional dispute settled by more wrestling. And of course there was ale. Barrels were rolled out, tapped, and emptied with astonishing speed. Tankards clinked, foam spilled, songs grew sloppier as the night deepened. Even the reeve loosened his tunic strings, laughing harder than he ever did in daylight. Ale was liquid courage, liquid forgetfulness, liquid joy. It blurred debts, softened grudges, and sometimes encouraged declarations of love that would later be denied. The priest might frown, but even he sometimes lingered at the edge of the feast, muttering about moderation while accepting a cup. Not all gatherings were weddings. Harvest festivals carried equal weight. When the grain was safely stored and the fields cleared, the village breathed together, finally free from the immediate fear of hunger. Fires blazed high, roasting whatever animals could be spared. Bread was baked in shapes to honour saints, apples bobbed in tubs of water, torches lit the night. Villagers sang songs of thanks and sometimes, cheekily, songs of complaint, reminding God that next year he might be generous enough to keep the rain in the right months. Other occasions rose from the church calendar. Saints' days brought processions, candles held aloft, banners fluttering, relics displayed with reverence. Children carried flowers, women sang hymns, men carried torches that spat sparks into the air. After the prayers, however, the mood often shifted. Once the priest retreated, villagers slipped into feasting and music again. Holy day or holiday, the line blurred quickly when a lay was involved. Feasts were also times for matchmaking. Young men and women eyed each other between dances. Parents negotiated betrothals in the shadows, whispers of dowries and land passing as easily as cups of ale. A glance across the green could change a family's fortune, or at least provide months of gossip. A girl who danced 3 times with the same boy was practically engaged in the eyes of the crowd, and any blushes were carefully noted by sharp-eyed matrons. But feasts weren't purely joyful. Beneath the laughter lingered tensions. Too much ale led to arguments, arguments to shoves, shoves to brawls rolling across the green. Sometimes disputes about land, inheritance, or insults erupted in spectacular timing right between dances. Villagers groaned, dragged combatants apart, and then cheerfully returned to the music, as if fists were simply part of the entertainment. In a way they were. The green served as court, stage, and battleground all at once. Children loved feasts most of all. They darted between tables, snatched fallen scraps, whirled in dances until they collapsed, sticky with honey cake and ale foam. For them, it was magic, a night when the rules bent, when parents looked the other way, when food was plentiful and laughter louder than chores. Their memories of feasts would sustain them through lean months, giving them something to dream of while hauling water or chasing geese. And perhaps that was the point. Feasts reminded everyone that life was more than toil. For one night, hunger stepped back, obligation loosened, and joy filled the air like torch smoke. The manor might claim rents, the church tithes, the reeve fines, but the feast belonged to the village itself. It was theirs, cobbled together from scraps and effort, but glowing brighter than any lord's banquet because it carried the flavour of survival made joyful. As the night deepened, the music slowed. Torches sputtered, laughter softened, and villagers drifted home, arms around each other, voices hoarse from singing. The green quieted, littered with scraps of bread, broken cups, and a lone shoe someone would deny ownership of in the morning. The bride and groom, exhausted, disappeared into the dark, their new life beginning with the chorus of snores rising from cottages. You walk away with the echoes in your ears, fiddles, laughter, clattering cups, shouts of triumph, groans of defeat. Feasts in their messy glory stitched the community together, patching holes left by toil, hunger, and obligation. They were noisy, chaotic, fleeting, but perhaps that was why they mattered. In a world of repetition, these gatherings were bright sparks, proof that even under mud and shadow, the village still knew how to laugh, sing, and dance. When the torches from the feast have guttered out and the last echoes of drunken singing fade, the quieter side of village life returns. The part where sickness creeps through doorways, where herbs hang drying in rafters, and where whispered charms share space with the priest's blessings. Illness is never far away in a medieval village. A chill caught in the fields can become fever by nightfall. A scratch from a rusty hoe can fester into something deadly. And without doctors, or rather with doctors too expensive to consider, villagers rely on the wisdom of midwives, healers, and the stubborn belief that saints, herbs, and luck might patch them together. Inside cottages, herbs dangle in bundles, their scents mixing with smoke and boiled cabbage. Sage for throats, rosemary for memory, yarrow for bleeding, mint for stomachs. Mothers know which plant soothes a colicky baby, and which keeps fleas at bay. Some of these remedies work, at least partly. Others are closer to wishful thinking wrapped in leaves. Still, to live without them would be unthinkable. Herbs are the closest thing to medicine the village can afford, and their presence is constant. Tucked into belts, stirred into pottage, steeped in weak teas, rubbed on wounds. The healer of the village, often a woman, sometimes feared as much as respected, carries knowledge passed down through generations. She can read fevers in flushed cheeks, listen to coughs and know which will pass and which will linger until the grave. Her hands smell perpetually of herbs and smoke, her apron stained with poultices and tinctures. She works not with instruments of iron and glass, but with knives, cloths, and an encyclopedic memory of which plant grows best in which ditch. When a baby refuses to breathe, she knows how to slap its back, how to whisper prayers, how to coax life from stubborn lungs. When an elder clutches his chest, she mixes herbs, lays hands and prays, though she knows some ailments no plant can touch. Yet her power makes people wary. Too much knowledge, too much success, and whispers rise. Witch, sorceress, consorter with spirits. The same villagers who beg her for remedies might later cross themselves when she passes, muttering that she has unnatural skill. In truth, her survival depends on walking a narrow line, helpful enough to be valued, but never so miraculous as to provoke fear. It is a dangerous balance, one that makes every cure a gamble. Charms mingle with herbs in daily life. Mothers hang amulets over cradles, small bags filled with salt, garlic, or bits of iron, to keep away the night air thought to bring sickness. Men carve crosses into doorframes, not just as declarations of faith, but as protection against spirits that might slip through cracks. A whispered rhyme over a wound is as common as a bandage. Words have power here, not because anyone proves them, but because belief itself is a salve. Sickness, when it strikes, turns cottages into prisons. A child burns with fever, shivering under thin blankets. A woman coughs until her ribs ache, the sound echoing through the smoky room. The family prays, feeds her teas of elderflower and honey, rubs her chest with warm oils and waits. Waiting is the hardest part. There are no hospitals, no quick cures, only the slow test of time. Sometimes the sick rise again, pale but alive. Sometimes they fade, and the priest is summoned to murmur last rites before the body cools. Death hovers close in every village. Graves fill with children, their stones leaning small and crooked in churchyards. Women die in childbirth, mourned with both sorrow and weary acceptance. Men collapse in fields, victims of fevers or accidents. Yet life does not stop. The plough still cuts furrows, bread still bakes, bells still toll. Grief is carried like another tool, heavy but necessary, worn at the hip until it becomes part of the body. Still, villagers fight against despair with stubborn rituals. When a baby is born, midwives wash it in warm water scented with herbs, then mark its forehead with the sign of the cross. When someone falls ill, neighbours bring food, though it may be only a crust or bowl of thin broth. The act itself is medicine, proof that the sick are not abandoned. When someone dies, the body is washed, wrapped, laid in the churchyard, and remembered in whispered prayers. Life here is brutal, but it is never solitary. Stranger remedies also thrive. Some villagers swear by charms of hare's foot hung around the neck. Others carry bones of saints, convinced that holiness clings to bone like scent to wool. A popular cure for fevers is to drink water poured over church bells, as if sanctity seeps into liquid. For toothaches, a prayer to St. Apollonia is muttered while biting a clove of garlic. For warts, some recommend rubbing them with bacon and then burying the bacon in the earth. The logic being that as the bacon rots, so too will the wart. Whether this works is questionable. Whether it makes people laugh is certain. Superstitions extend to dreams as well. A woman dreams of a black dog and fears death in the family. A man dreams of fish and predicts a wedding. Children whisper of fairies who slip in through cracks and steal breath. To modern minds these may seem fanciful, but for villagers, dreams are as real as herbs. They are another map to survival, another tool to navigate a world that rarely offers clarity. And yet, humour persists even here. A man with a hacking cough jokes that he's merely allergic to work. A woman limping from an infected blister insists her shoe must be cursed by jealous neighbours. A boy with freckles declares them proof he's kissed by angels, though his friends counter that it looks more like he lost a fight with porridge. Laughter doesn't cure, but it keeps despair from settling too comfortably. At night, when the cottages dim to embers, whispers rise. A mother leans over her child, muttering both Ave Marias and charms of protection. A father sprinkles salt across the threshold, muttering against spirits. The priest may preach against such practices, but in the dark, faith and superstition twine together like smoke. Better to do both than risk either failing. The line between healing and harming is thin. Herbs can soothe, but in the wrong dose they can kill. Charms may comfort, but they can also brand. Someone is suspicious. Midwives in particular walk a dangerous road, respected when births go well, blamed when they do not. A baby lost in childbirth may be fate, or it may be blamed on the midwife's supposed dealings with dark forces. In a world that craves explanations, suspicion always finds fertile ground. Still, life pushes on. Children survive fevers, women recover from childbirth, men return to fields after injuries. Each recovery feels like victory, proof that herbs, charms, prayers, or simple stubbornness have power. Villagers remember these triumphs, repeating them in stories. Old Agnes cured her cough with thyme tea. Little John's fever broke after his father hung garlic by the bed. These stories become part of the lore, shaping remedies for the next generation. When you leave a cottage heavy with sickness, you carry the smell of herbs and smoke with you, the sound of whispered prayers lingering in your ears. Sickness may be constant, but so too is resilience. The medieval village may lack doctors, but it does not lack determination. Healing here is less science than tapestry. Threads of plants, faith, charms, and love woven together, frayed but unbroken. For all the laughter at feasts and the whispered prayers at sickbeds, a medieval village also lived under the stern gaze of justice, or at least the rough and ready version of it available when your community was too small for proper courts and too poor for mercy. Crime and punishment shaped daily life not as occasional interruptions, but as constant reminders that survival depended not only on crops and cattle, but on order enforced through shame, spectacle, and fear. If the manor's reeve and the church's tithe kept villagers obedient in work and faith, then the stocks in the village green kept them obedient in behaviour. Petty crimes were the most common. Theft of food, scraps of cloth or firewood happened often, because hunger and cold don't wait for permission. A man might slip an onion from a neighbour's garden, a woman might hide a loaf meant for the tithe, a boy might pocket a chicken egg and swear the hen was barren. These were not grand heists, they were survival gambles. Yet even such small thefts could bring swift punishment, because once one villager got away with it, others might follow, and then the thin fabric of communal trust would unravel faster than a poorly spun thread. When caught, the guilty often found themselves in the stocks. The stocks stood on the green, a wooden frame with holes for head and hands designed less for pain than for humiliation. Offenders were locked in for hours, sometimes days, forced to sit while the entire community walked past. Children threw clods of mud, women muttered sharp insults, men shook their heads in disappointment or sneered in amusement. The punishment wasn't the wood biting into wrists. It was the spectacle of being reduced from neighbour to object of ridicule. The shame lingered longer than the bruises. For more serious crimes, harsher measures loomed. Fines were common, coin paid to the lord or church, or goods confiscated. If you couldn't pay, livestock might be seized, and losing a cow was like losing your livelihood. Repeated offences risk flogging, a public whipping that left stripes across the back, and memories burned deeper than skin. In extreme cases, theft too bold, violence too bloody, gallows might be erected. But executions were rare in villages, partly because lords preferred labourers alive to pay rent. Death was expensive, shame was cheap. Not all crimes were theft. Gossip itself could be punished if it led to slander. A woman accused of spreading malicious rumours might be forced to wear the scold's bridle, a cruel iron contraption fixed around the head with a metal tongue piece to silence her. The sight was meant to terrify others into holding their tongues. In truth, it more often fueled more gossip. Whispers about whether she deserved it, what she had said, whether the reeve simply disliked her. Punishment could silence words, but never the thoughts behind them. Alehouse brawls, frequent as rain, were handled with a mixture of laughter and punishment. Two men wrestling in the mud over dice or insults might be fined a few pennies, or thrown in the stock side by side, forced to stew in their anger while geese nipped at their toes. Villagers often jeered, sometimes placing bets on whether the fighters would end up friends again by nightfall. Most did. Alehouse quarrels burned hot and short, rarely spilling beyond bruises and sore heads. The church added its own brand of discipline. Failure to pay tithes could result in public penance, kneeling outside the church in sackcloth barefoot, begging forgiveness from neighbours filing past. Missing Mass too often risked harsh sermons directed at you from the pulpit, your name rolled out like a curse for all to hear, for sins whispered in confession, adultery, blasphemy, drunkenness. The priest might assign long prayers, fasting, or pilgrimages. Spiritual punishments stung as much as physical, because they marked you not only as lawbreaker, but as sinner. Superstitions often blurred the line between crime and misfortune. If cows sickened, crops failed, or children wasted away, whispers of witchcraft circulated. A woman too skilled at herbs, too sharp-tongued, too solitary, might find herself accused. The punishment wasn't always fire or gallows. In small villages, it was more often suspicion, avoidance, or being hauled before the manor court to defend herself. Still, the threat hung heavy. To be different was dangerous. To be too knowledgeable was riskier still. Children, too, faced discipline, A boy caught stealing apples might be smacked with a stick or made to sweep the church steps. A girl caught shirking chores might have her hair pulled or be paraded through the lanes, with a mocking rhyme shouted behind her. Harshness was thought to teach survival. Spare the rod, spoil the child, and in a world this unforgiving, no one could afford spoiled children. Despite the severity, villagers found ways to mock justice even while enduring it. A man in the stocks might crack jokes at passers-by, turning his punishment into a performance. A woman fined for gossip might loudly confess, while slipping more rumours into her apologies. Humour was rebellion, softening humiliation with laughter, turning punishment into theatre. Even the reeve sometimes had to hide a smile when a supposed criminal mocked his authority so cleverly that the crowd laughed instead of jeered. Justice was never blind in the village. The wealthy could bribe, the powerful could threaten, the well-liked might be excused with a warning. The poor, disliked or friendless bore the brunt of harsher measures. Everyone knew it, yet everyone played along, because order, however unfair, was better than chaos. The stocks may have been unjust, but they kept the village from unravelling. At night, when the stock stood empty, children crept to them, daring each other to lock a hand inside, laughing nervously at the clunk of wood. They knew the device too well. Every child had watched neighbours squirm in it. For them, the stocks were part of the landscape, as normal as the church bell or the mill wheel. Punishment was not spectacle alone, it was education, teaching even the youngest that rules shaped survival. And survival was the point. A village could not afford unchecked theft, endless brawls, or constant gossip. It needed order, however crude. So justice came in the form of humiliation, fines, flogging, and prayer, not lofty speeches or legal parchment. It came with mud underfoot, jeers from neighbours, and the bitter taste of shame lingering long after. As you walk past the green in the evening light, the stocks stand empty, but their presence looms. They are as much a warning as a tool, a reminder that though life here is bound by soil and smoke, it is also bound by rules enforced in wood and laughter. In the end, justice in the medieval village is not about fairness. It is about survival, and survival always leaves bruises. The sun sinks slowly, and with it, the rhythm of labour shifts once more. The long shadow of the church stretches across the fields. The manor darkens against the glow of the west, and villagers gather up the last scraps of daylight like misers hoarding coin. Evening in a medieval village is not leisure as you know it. It is simply the continuation of work until the dark insists on silence. Sunset toil, fading light, the name itself is honest. Men return from the fields dragging weary steps, tools slung over shoulders, cloaks stiff with sweat and mud. The ploughshares glisten with dirt clinging stubbornly, oxen snort clouds of steam into the cooling air. Farmers glance at the sky as though trying to measure how many minutes remain, before darkness forces them home. There is always more to do. One more furrow, one more weed, one more repair. But the light grows thin, and no candle can match the sun when it comes to farming. Women gather in washing from hedges, calling children in from lanes where they linger, reluctant to abandon games. The smell of smoke intensifies as hearths are stoked again, fires coaxed back to life with careful breaths. Pots bubble, bread reheats, and suppers simmer. Not feasts, but enough to stretch the belly through the night. The aroma of pottage floats into the lanes, each cottage carrying its own slight variation. More beans here, more leeks there, the rare sliver of bacon perfuming an entire household's air with luxury. Animals are driven back to barns and pens. Sheep huddle, bleating as if protesting curfews. Pigs grunt, chickens flap noisily, dogs bark at shadows as though the coming night itself were an intruder. Children, half playing and half complaining, chase stubborn geese who seem determined to sleep wherever they please. Villagers shout, laugh, curse and coax, until finally beasts and birds are settled behind wooden bars. Only then can the humans truly begin their own evenings. But even then, tasks wait. Roofs must be patched where the thatch has sagged. Fences repaired where pigs tested their boundaries. Tools scraped, oiled and stored so they will last another season. Buckets of water are hauled from the well one last time. because thirst at midnight is far worse when the bucket is empty. Clothing is shaken, mended and folded, wool is spun in dim light, eyes straining, hands still restless even as bodies long to collapse. Evening is not rest so much as work adjusted for the dark. Neighbours call to each other across the lanes, someone offers leftover embers to relight a stubborn hearth, another asks whether anyone has spare onions to trade for a lump of butter. Voices carry gently, softened by dusk, laughter mingling with smoke. The day's quarrels, whether about stubborn oxen or gossip whispered at the well, often dissolve by evening into small kindnesses. Survival demands reconciliation. You cannot afford enemies when you may need to borrow their fire tomorrow. And yet there are moments of peace in the toil. The sky streaks with crimson and gold, and villagers pause even briefly to look. Birds wheel overhead, their cries sharp against the fading hum of work. Children chase each other through the lanes, their laughter fading into giggles as shadows grow. Somewhere a shepherd's pipe carries faint music, a thin thread of melody winding across fields like smoke. These are small luxuries, free, fleeting, but enough to remind tired hearts why they rise again each dawn. Suppers are eaten quickly but not without ritual. Families sit on stools around wooden boards, bowls in hand, spoons shared when necessary. Bread is passed, dipped into stew, torn with calloused fingers. Ale is poured sparingly. Children, receiving small sips as their right. Conversation is muted, more about practicalities than poetry. Which tool must be repaired, which hen laid, whose cough grew worse. Yet beneath the mundanity lies comfort. To sit together, to eat while the fire crackles, to hear the familiar chorus of voices in the same room. This is as close as the village comes to luxury. Outside the lane's quiet. Smoke rises in thin streams from every chimney hole. Dogs curl beside doors, cats slink along walls, geese finally surrender to sleep. The air cools sharply, damp creeping in from the fields. Stars begin to puncture the sky, one by one, faint but steady. Villagers glance upward as they step outside for final chores, fetching wood, checking livestock, emptying scraps, and the sight of constellations comforts them. In a world where seasons dictate hunger or plenty, stars are the only unchanging companions. Even the manor looming high softens in the dusk. Torches flicker at its gates, voices echo from its hall, but its presence feels less oppressive under stars. The church bell tolls once more, not to summon work but to mark time. The day is done. Its sound rolls across the cottages, settling like a benediction, whether welcome or weary. Yet the night does not belong wholly to peace. Dangers creep with darkness. Wolves are said to prowl at the edge of the woods, their howls carrying faintly through the fields. Bandits may lurk on roads, though most are likely more rumour than reality. Still, villagers bar doors, slide bolts and whisper charms. A sprig of rosemary hung by the hearth, a cross carved into the threshold, a muttered prayer. All are insurance policies against unseen threats. By the time darkness blankets the village fully, only embers glow in cottages, and only whispers drift between households. Evening has folded into night. Tomorrow will demand the same toil, the same smoke, the same bread and pottage. But for now, as feet rest on straw, as shoulders sag, as the stars wheel above, there is a fragile calm. Sunset in a medieval village is not grand or leisurely. It is chores carried out with aching muscles, food eaten quickly, tools set aside with relief. Yet in those final moments before night, amid smoke and starlight, laughter and labour, the village breathes together, tired, wary but unbroken. Night descends like a heavy cloak and the village exhales. The noise of the day fades, the animals quiet, and even the tavern grows still after its final stragglers stumble home. Darkness here is not the gentle dimness you know, softened by lamps and streetlights. It is absolute, a thick ink that swallows lanes, hedges and cottages alike. Only the faint shimmer of moonlight, the glimmer of stars and the occasional ember from a hearth break it. In this silence, in this hush, the village folds inward. Inside cottages the hearth glows faintly, embers pulsing like a tired heart. Families gather close, voices low, bodies pressed against each other for warmth. Beds are not beds as you imagine them. They are sacks of straw spread on the floor, sometimes softened with wool, sometimes not. Parents and children often share the same space, huddled together under rough blankets or cloaks. Privacy is a luxury of the wealthy. Here, you learn to sleep to the rhythm of your neighbour's snores, your siblings tossing, your babies whimpering. Before sleep, prayers are murmured. Children whisper Pater Noster, stumbling over Latin syllables that taste foreign on their tongues. Mothers cross themselves, whispering pleas to saints to keep the cough from worsening, the crops from failing, the wolves from drawing closer. Fathers mutter charms they'd never admit in church, scraps of rhymes passed down from grandmothers who knew herbs and spirits better than priests. Faith and superstition mingle as naturally as smoke and air, blending into a single shield against the dark. The sounds of night are different. The wind presses against shutters, whistling faintly through cracks. Dogs bark once, twice, then settle. A pig snorts in its pen, rolling in straw. Geese mutter in their sleep, still suspicious even while dreaming. From the woods an owl hoots, its call deep and mournful, like a warning from another world. Sometimes wolves howl, distant but chilling, carrying across the fields until every child pulls the blanket tighter to their chin. The night is alive, full of voices not human, reminding villagers how small their circle of fire truly is. The danger is real. Fires can spark from embers, catching in thatch and racing across roofs before anyone stirs. Bandits may creep along roads, testing doors and windows for weakness. Illness often worsens at night. Fevers rise, coughs deepen, breath rattles. The priest says demons prowl in these hours, and even the bravest farmer feels a shiver when the wind rattles the shutters too hard. But fear alone cannot banish sleep. Bodies that labour from dawn to dusk demand rest, and exhaustion is the truest sedative. So gradually the village softens. Snores rise, steady and unself-conscious. Babies whimper, then are rocked back to silence. A child murmurs in a dream, calling for a toy long since broken. Feet shift in straw, embers crackle, then dim. The night stretches on, wrapping the village in stillness so complete that even the stars seem to pause above. Yet even in rest, life continues. Dreams carry villagers into strange landscapes, a field of endless wheat, a church bell that tolls forever, a feast where bread never runs out. Some wake suddenly, sweating, convinced they felt a presence in the dark. Others smile in their sleep, lips moving as though tasting food richer than any real supper. In dreams, hunger is fed, grief softened, fears reshaped into stories. The hours pass slowly, the moon arcs across the sky, casting silvery light that turns mud lanes into rivers of shadow. Dogs stir, sniff the air, then curl, back down. A cock crows too early, mistaken by starlight, and is angrily hushed by villagers who throw shoes toward the noise. For a while, nothing moves except smoke rising lazily from chimneys, faint wisps against the cold night. And then, at last, the first grey hint of dawn appears. The village stirs faintly. A cough here, a child shifting there, a dog stretching. Embers are coaxed back into flame, smoke thickens, and the rhythm begins again. But in that thin moment between night and day, when the silence still holds, the village breathes together, resting in fragile peace. You picture it now. Cottages crouched in the dark, smoke sighing from roofs, families huddled on straw, the church standing watch, the manor looming in shadow, the fields stretching silent beneath the stars. For all the toil, hunger, punishment and fear the village endures, its strength lies not in grandeur but in repetition. Dawn to dusk, dusk to dawn, live stitched together by bread, pottage, prayer and laughter. And so, as our long wandering through this single day reaches its close, let the imagery soften. Picture the quiet glow of embers, the hushed breaths of sleeping children, the steady rise and fall of the oxen's flanks in their stalls. Picture the stars wheeling slowly, indifferent but constant. Picture the bell waiting in the tower, ready to toll the next dawn. Let your breath match the slow rhythm of the night. Let your shoulders sink as though laying down on straw softened by warmth and closeness. The villagers sleep, the animals rest. The fields dream beneath frost or dew. Tomorrow the same cycle will begin again, as it has for centuries, as it always will. But tonight there is stillness. Rest with them in their silence. The embers glow, the shutters creak, the geese mutter, the stars shine. The village, weary but unbroken, sleeps, and you, drifting now, can sleep too.